Lyra Ashford had learned, long before she understood why, that some doors in life open easily for everyone else, and stay shut for you. In the Blackthorn pack, doors opened wide for alphas. They opened a little less wide for betas, and for omegas like Lyra, most doors simply never opened at all. She was 18 now, standing at the edge of the training ring with her arms wrapped around herself, watching the morning mist curl over the grass. Today was supposed to be a day of pride. Every wolf in the pack was expected to complete their first full shift by 18, the moment their bodies and their wolves became one. Lyra had tried 100 times. She had cried in the woods alone, begging her wolf to answer her call. But no matter how hard she reached, something inside her stayed folded shut, like a flower that refused to bloom. All she could manage was a half shift, fur patched over skin, claws that never fully formed, a shape that satisfied no one, least of all herself. The pack had a word for wolves like her: broken. "Look, it's the half-wolf," someone laughed behind her. Lyra didn't turn around. She recognized the voice. Draven, the alpha's son, tall and golden, and cruel, in the practiced way boys become cruel when they know no one will ever punish them for it. He was already surrounded by a small circle of pack members, all of them watching her the way people watch something they've decided, long ago, is beneath their attention. "Come on, Lyra," Draven said, stepping closer. "Show us your wolf." "Oh, wait." He grinned at the others. "You don't have one." The circle laughed. Lyra felt the heat crawl up her neck, but she kept her chin level. She had learned that crying only made it worse. Crying gave them something new to laugh about. "That's enough," said a voice from the ring's edge. It wasn't gentle. It wasn't kind either. It was simply an order, spoken the way alphas spoke when they expected to be obeyed. Lyra looked up and saw a stranger standing at the fence, arms crossed, dark eyes sharp as knives. She didn't know him, but everyone else clearly did, because the laughter died instantly. "Alpha Kane," Draven said, straightening. "I didn't realize you'd arrived early." "Clearly," Kane said, his gaze moving from Draven to Lyra and staying there a moment longer than it should have. "Is this how Blackthorn treats its own?" No one answered him. Kane Duskrider was the heir of the neighboring Duskrider pack, here on a diplomatic visit to discuss uniting the two packs. He had a reputation for being difficult to please and impossible to fool, and the tension in the ring told Lyra that reputation was well earned. She didn't know why he had bothered to speak up for her. Alphas from other packs never noticed omegas. They especially never defended them. She used the distraction to slip away before anyone could say another word. That night, Lyra walked alone toward White Cliff Ridge, a stretch of land at the edge of pack territory that the elders had always called forbidden. No one gave a real reason why. Some said the ground there was cursed. Others said it was simply dangerous, full of loose rock and steep drops. Lyra didn't care anymore. She was tired of being careful. She was tired of trying to earn a place in a pack that had already decided she didn't deserve one. Tonight was the night of the century moon, an event that occurred only once every 100 years, when the moon rose larger and brighter than any pack member currently alive had ever witnessed. The elders spoke of it in hushed, reverent tones, saying the century moon revealed the truest nature hidden inside every wolf. Lyra didn't feel hopeful about that. If the moon revealed truth, she was afraid of what it might show about her. Maybe it would only prove, once and for all, that there was truly nothing wolf inside her at all. She climbed higher, her boots slipping against loose stone, until she reached a wide clearing near the top of the ridge. The moon had begun to rise, and its light was already different from any moonlight she had ever seen. It didn't sit gently on the land. It seemed to pour, silver and thick, over every rock and blade of grass, catching on strange veins of pale mineral running through the cliffside like threads of frozen light. Lyra sat down on a flat stone and let out a breath she felt like she'd been holding her entire life. "I'm sorry," she whispered, to no one, to everyone. "I'm sorry I can't be what you need me to be." For the first time since she was a child, she stopped trying. She stopped forcing her body to obey a shift that never came. She stopped bracing for failure. She simply sat there, empty and honest, and let herself feel every bit of the shame and loneliness she had swallowed for years. And in that stillness, something shifted. It didn't feel like the failed attempts of the past, the desperate straining that led nowhere. This felt like a locked door finally recognizing the right key. A warmth spread through her chest, gentle at first, then rising like a tide she could not hold back. The moonlight around her grew brighter, gathering toward her as if drawn by invisible strings. Lyra gasped as her skin began to change, not tearing or straining the way she remembered from her failed attempts, but flowing, smooth and certain, the way water finds its shape. When it was over, she was not standing on two legs anymore. She lowered her eyes and saw paws where her hands had been, but they were unlike any paws she had ever seen. Her fur was not brown or gray or black. It shimmered like cut crystal, catching the moonlight and scattering it into 100 small rainbows across the stone. She turned her head and caught her reflection in a still pool of rainwater nearby. A wolf, built of light and diamond, looked back at her, eyes glowing pale silver, coat faceted like gemstone, powerful and impossibly beautiful. Lyra didn't understand what she was looking at. She only knew, with a certainty that settled deep into her bones, that this was hers. This had always been hers, waiting. She let out a long, echoing howl, and the sound rolled down from White Cliff Ridge and across the sleeping territory of the Blackthorn Pack. Kane Duskrider had been walking the border that night, restless, unable to settle after the scene he'd witnessed in the training ring. He told himself he was simply patrolling, doing his duty as a visiting alpha, checking the boundaries between packs. But the truth was smaller and harder to admit. He kept thinking about the girl who had stood there and taken every insult without flinching, without begging, without breaking. There had been something in her stillness that struck him harder than any show of strength he'd witnessed in years. When the howl reached him, every hair on his body rose at once. It wasn't like any howl he had ever heard. It carried a weight, an authority, that pulled at something ancient buried inside his own wolf. Before he had consciously decided to move, his feet were already carrying him toward White Cliff Ridge, following a pull he could not explain, and did not try to resist. He crested the final rise just as Lyra turned to face him, still in her wolf form, moonlight sliding off her crystal coat like water off glass. Kane stopped where he stood, his breath caught in his throat. He had heard old stories, the kind told to pups at night and dismissed by most adults as myth. Stories of the first pack, the original bloodline from which every wolf pack descended, and of a rare and sacred lineage within it called the Diamond Wolves. It was said their bloodline had been hidden away 1,000 years ago, scattered and disguised among lesser packs, to protect them from enemies who would have hunted such power for their own gain. It was said that any true alpha, upon meeting a diamond wolf, would feel an instinct too old and too deep to fight. Kane felt it now. His knees bent before his mind fully caught up with what his body was doing. He knelt in the frost-covered grass, head bowed, his own wolf spirit pressing forward inside him, urging him toward submission with a force he had never experienced and could not override. It wasn't fear, it wasn't weakness, it was recognition, the kind an old soul gives to something greater than itself. "You," he said quietly, lifting his eyes even as his body remained lowered. "You're the reason Blackthorn has felt wrong for years. You're what they've been missing." Lyra shifted back slowly, her wolf form melting into her human shape, though the faint shimmer of moonlight seemed to cling to her skin even now, as if reluctant to let her go. She looked down at Kane, an alpha from a powerful neighboring pack, kneeling before her in the frost, and for a moment, she simply couldn't speak. "I don't understand," she finally said. "I'm nobody. I'm the weakest wolf in my pack." "No," Kane said, rising slowly, though he kept his head slightly bowed, unable to fully shake the instinct even standing. "You were never weak. You were hidden. There's a difference." Word of what happened on White Cliff Ridge did not stay quiet for long. Packs share more than land and laws. They share a deep, invisible bond that runs through every member's blood, and powerful moments ripple through that bond whether anyone intends them to or not. By the time the moon reached its highest point, every wolf in the Blackthorn pack had felt it, a pull in their chest, a call they couldn't ignore. One by one, they began walking toward the pack house, drawn by instinct they didn't understand. Draven was among them, his earlier smugness replaced by pale confusion, as his legs carried him forward against his own will. Even the pack alpha, Lyra's father, felt it, and for the first time in years, fear flickered across his face. Fear not of an enemy, but of what he had failed to see standing in his own home. By midnight, they stood outside Lyra's door in the cold, dozens of alphas and betas and pack members, who had spent years overlooking her, now unable to resist the pull of her presence. When she stepped outside, still dressed simply, still looking every bit the quiet girl they had dismissed, they knelt anyway, one after another, until the entire courtyard was filled with bowed heads. Draven knelt last, his jaw tight with the effort of accepting what his body would not let him refuse. "I didn't know," he said quietly, not quite an apology, but close to one. "No," Lyra said, and her voice, though soft, carried through the silent courtyard with new weight. "You didn't. None of you did. But you chose to be cruel anyway, when kindness would have cost you nothing." She let the words settle before she continued. "I'm not going to pretend the last 18 years didn't happen. I remember every insult. I remember every door that closed. But I'm not interested in revenge. I'm interested in making sure no one else in this pack ever has to stand where I stood." In the weeks that followed, Lyra took her place not as a distant ruler, but as an alpha who remembered exactly what it felt like to be powerless. She reformed the pack's rigid hierarchy, ending the practice of ranking wolves as lesser simply because their gifts arrived differently, or later, or not in the shape everyone expected. Omegas were given real voices in pack decisions for the first time in generations. Draven, stripped of the entitled authority he'd once carried so carelessly, was given a chance to earn respect honestly, something he had never had to do before. Cain stayed. Not because tradition demanded a match between two powerful packs, and not because his knee had bent to her on Whitecliff Ridge. He stayed because he had watched her rebuild an entire community with patience instead of anger, strength instead of cruelty, and he found he did not want to be anywhere else. "You didn't need saving," he told her one evening, as they stood together at the edge of the ridge where everything had changed. "I think I understood that the moment I saw you in that training ring, long before I ever saw your wolf." Lyra smiled, the wind catching her hair, moonlight settling over her shoulders like something that had always belonged there. "Maybe not saving," she said, "but I wouldn't mind some company." Lyra smiled. Cain laughed softly and took her hand, and together, they looked out over the territory that was now, finally and truly, hers. The girl they had once called broken had never been broken at all. She had simply been waiting, quietly and patiently, for the world to catch up to what she had always known was true, that her worth was never something anyone else had the right to decide.